I'll start again. I didn't have a microphone. I apologise. Welcome to this ordinary meeting of Wingecarribee Shire Council on Wednesday the 16th of August. Acknowledgement of country. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledge the Gundungurra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respects to elders both past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here or watching today. Statement of ethical obligations. As Administrator, I will undertake the duties of the Office of Administrator in the best interest of the people of the Wingecarribee Shire Council area and act faithfully and impartially in carrying out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in me under the Local Government Act 1993 or any other act to the best of my ability and judgment. I am committed to the declaration of conflicts of interest in relation to items listed for consideration on the agenda or which are considered at this meeting in accordance with the Code of Conduct and the Code of Meeting Practice. Apologies, there obviously are none. Adoption of minutes of previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on 19 July 2023 be adopted as correct record of the proceedings of the meeting and declare that carried. General Manager, declarations of interest.
There are no declarations, Mr. May.
Thank you. There is one administrator minute which was put on the website last night, which I am not going to read, but I again remind people that the election is on the 14th of September 2024, not as I have got wrong last time. In relation to the administrator minute, I would move that the administrator minute be received and noted and declare that carried. General Manager, we now move to the matters listed for consideration at the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. May. So the Exec Manager Strategic Outcomes will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, sorry, I'm just checking what report we are. Sorry, probably should check that before I come to the counter. Sorry, this report relates to the Robertson Village Place Plan, and I'm really, I guess, happy to present on behalf of my team, but also on behalf of the Robertson community, the draft Place Plan to seek council endorsement to proceed to public exhibition. So, Mr. May, the Robertson Village Place Plan is a community-led strategic plan that seeks to address the economic, housing, social, environmental and cultural needs of the Robertson community. And it stems from a number of actions contained within the local housing strategy and the local strategic planning statement. And it was an attempt to provide a more holistic approach to place, and rather than address housing or economic development in isolation, it was an attempt at a community-led and holistic approach to planning for our towns and villages. It was also very much an attempt to work more proactively with communities to address their needs at a strategic level. Rather than waiting to find out what's not working and trying to fix it, it was about finding out what's important and what our community values and putting plans in place now so that we're delivering better outcomes into the future. The plan was developed through extensive consultation with the local community. And we're seeking council endorsement to proceed now to the formal exhibition process with the Robertson Village Place Plan.
Thanks very much for that. And General Manager, it's good to see a recognition being given to the authors of these reports. It's obviously there's a big team behind the scenes, and it's good that they get an acknowledgement. And having said that, again, congratulations to your team on that award, which I mentioned in my minute, but I can still hear the presenter saying that it was a standout. Unfortunately, you weren't there, but I thought it was fabulous. The panel deals with this, and they've endorsed your recommendation, but they've also added that consideration be given to the relationship between the draft community-based heritage study and the Robinson Place plan. Your report addresses that issue, but I do think to close the cycle, for the matter, it should be noted in the recommendation. So I'm going to move up the officer's recommendation 1, 2, 3, and at number 4. In response to the request of the local planning panel, it be noted that council staff are satisfied that the Robinson Village Place plan is not inconsistent with the draft community-based heritage study, and declare that carried. The next item is 8.2, planning proposal, the Mittagong Airfield.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Park.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, this report relates to a planning proposal to include land owned by the Mittagong Airfield in Schedule 1 of the Wingecarribee Local Environmental Plan. So, Mr. May, the planning proposal would enable a boundary adjustment between the 2 existing lots owned by the airfield to create 2 new lots, one of which would retain the existing dwelling entitlement. The other lot would retain all of the land and buildings and infrastructure used to run the airfield. Mr. May should know that the Mittagong Airfield is a critical piece of community infrastructure that was critical in times like the bushfires, any emergency evacuation events. That the airfield and its ongoing viability is critical for our community, and the planning proposal would enable the boundary adjustment and the residual lot with a dwelling entitlement to be sold off, which would, I guess, facilitate the ongoing viability of the airfield and secure its long-term future for the Shire. So the matter was considered at the local planning panel meeting on the 26th of July, and the panel supported the staff's recommendation, and the report now recommends that we finalise the planning proposal with the Department of Planning.
Thank you. In relation to item 8.2, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 77 of the business paper 1 and 2, and declare that carried. 8.3, planning proposal for Yarrawah Road, Moss Vale.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Park, if you could address some of the points that Mr. Hunt raised in his address to council, and in particular the reference to the roundabout and the traffic arrangements. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. So, Mr. May, this report relates to a planning proposal to rezone land at Yarrawah Road in Moss Vale to be incorporated as part of the broader Chelsea Gardens Kumunji urban release area, often referred to now as the Ashbourne Estate. I might address Mr. Hunt's comments first because I'll otherwise forget. So the planning proposal does not seek to change any of the approved traffic arrangements across the site. Rather, it actually tries to ensure that these sites are integrated into that broader transport network. The reference to the roundabout has come from a submission on behalf of the owners of Chelsea Gardens Kumunji urban release area, and they've flagged in their submission that they will potentially seek to modify their approved concept master plan DA across the site to remove that roundabout. It's definitely not something that's currently proposed by council and is not proposed as part of this planning proposal. If they were to modify their application, that would have to go through a rigorous assessment, the same as any development application or modification of a development application would. And there's certainly no guarantee that council would be willing to remove that roundabout. It's identified in the site-specific development control plan as one of the key access points to the site. So there would have to be justification to remove that, and it's certainly not in relation to the planning proposal, rather a proposal of the developer of the broader Chelsea Gardens urban release area. Does that make sense
But does that assume on the part of the owners of Ashbourne that they will take ownership of these extra lots if they are rezoned?
No, so the proposed roundabout and the access road that comes in from that proposed roundabout at the southern corner of the Chelsea Gardens Urban Release Area is wholly, well, the roundabout's within the road reserve, but the access road is wholly within the land currently owned by the Chelsea Gardens Kumunji Urban Release Area. The 3 lots subject to the planning proposal immediately adjoin what would be that new road into the urban release area.
Yes, I agree with Mr. Hunt. If you're travelling from Sheepwash Road, it's a long way away. Now, but you know, you're coming towards travelling west, I suppose. It's not a clear intersection, is it?
No, and as I said, it's certainly not council's proposal to remove a roundabout. It's been flagged as a submission onto the planning proposal on behalf of the owners of Chelsea Gardens as something that they're considering putting in a modification application to. At the moment, we have no modification application to even assess, but if we do get one, it would have to go through a rigorous assessment because it is quite a tricky intersection. So it would have to be looked at extremely closely.
Well, thank you, and I think this gives the value of having open question time where some of these things can be addressed for residents. Thank you.
Sorry, I'll continue with the planning proposal, sorry. So the planning proposal, as I said, seeks to rezone land at Yarrawa Road to be incorporated in as part of the Chelsea Gardens Urban Release Area. By way of background, the Chelsea Gardens Urban Release Area was zoned, I believe in 2017 by the state government. Because it was a proponent-initiated planning proposal and not supported by council, council at the time never determined the appropriate boundaries for the urban release area. And if you look at a map of this land, it seems like development will occur wholly around this land, and it seems like it should have been incorporated as part of the urban release area. So in developing the local housing strategy, council had a close look at where the boundaries and where the appropriate boundaries for that urban release area should be, and it was recommended that these sites be incorporated into the urban release area. Generally, council, as part of its urban release area planning, goes through quite a detailed process in terms of infrastructure planning and master planning for these areas. And we've made a commitment under the local housing strategy that we wouldn't rezone land before going through that process. In this case, it was an exception to the rule because it was trying to incorporate this area now as part of the urban release area so it could be properly considered in terms of the servicing for the broader Chelsea Gardens urban release area. So it has followed somewhat of a different process to other urban release areas. So the planning proposal has been on public exhibition. It was reported back to the local planning panel on the 26th of July, and the panel supported the staff recommendation, which is that the planning proposal be supported for finalisation.
Look, I have some reservations about this, not about the eventual rezoning, but the process. I'm determined to ensure that residents get their value in infrastructure planning when these new land releases occur, and that the council staff don't have to negotiate in effect with a new purchaser, but a new purchaser knows the ground rules before they start, and if necessary they can discount, or they can seek a discount in the purchase of the land. And I think this is very, very important. I don't think this has happened in Ashbourne. Is probably a great example of where the staff are playing catch up, or trying to play catch up, and they're lost opportunities, and when it comes to infrastructure, existing ratepayers end up having to pay for it, which is really just not fair. So I'm going to move, not the recommendation, but I think it's inevitable this land will be rezoned. It makes sense, but let's do it slowly and properly to ensure that residents get what they're entitled to as well. So I'd move that the planning proposal to rezone land at 121, 131 and 153 Yarra Road, Moss Vale be deferred to allow for an appropriate infrastructure funding mechanism to be in place prior to the land being rezoned. I declare that carried. Next item is 8.4, planning proposal for 35 Elizabeth Street and 4 Old Bong Bong Way, Burradoo. GM.
Second last one, Mr. Park.
Thank you, General Manager. So, Mr. May, this report relates to a planning proposal that would facilitate a boundary adjustment between 2 existing lots at 35 Elizabeth Street and 4 Old Bong Bong Way in Burradoo. So the 2 existing lots currently, one is of a residential nature and the other is of a sort of small rural lot. They currently have an agreement where one of the yachts is leased by the other lot for the purpose of primary production on the land, and the proposal seeks to facilitate a boundary adjustment between those 2 lots, which would provide a larger lot for primary production purposes and a smaller residual lot that would retain the existing dwelling accessed off Elizabeth Street, which is in keeping with the existing character of the Burradoo area. It is important to note that the planning proposal would not facilitate any additional dwelling entitlements. It is about the orderly use of land and particularly about increasing the size of the land that's used for primary production purposes, because council are committed to a planning framework that facilitates primary production on land. Mr. May, the matter was considered at the local planning panel meeting on the 26th of July, and while the panel supported the staff recommendation to support the planning proposal, they did provide advice that sought to restrict the smaller lot to a minimum of 9,300 metres squared to ensure that the larger of the 2 lots could not be further subdivided through what's called a clause 4.6 variation to the development standards. The staff have considered the panel's advice and support that advice, and you'll note in the recommendation before council today that the planning proposal seeks to include a minimum lot size of 9,300 metres squared in accordance with the panel's advice.
There is no officer's recommendation from what went to the panel in the report.
Sorry, Mr. May, that was an oversight on my behalf. I have provided a copy to our governance team to be provided with the minutes. It was largely the same recommendation, minus the subject to a proposed Lot A having a minimum lot size of at least 9,300 metres squared. So that was added in accordance with the panel's advice, but I've provided a copy of this recommendation to our governance team to ensure it can be provided with the minutes of today's meeting.
So that recommendation will be built into the minutes. Thanks. It's just important that it's a continuation, and residents with something like this can see the value of having a peer review in effect through the panel of the processes. That doesn't devalue in any way the officer's recommendations, but they've made doubly sure, I think, that it can't happen. Is that correct?
Yeah, look, I completely agree. And it was, as I said, it was an oversight on my behalf to not include that in there, but it should be.
Yeah. Okay. In relation to item 8.4, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 2.8 of the business paper 1 and 2, and declare that carried. The next item is strategic outcome works program update. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Before I ask Mr. Park to talk to his report, just like to make a couple of comments that this report highlights a significant body of work that's been undertaken by the strategic outcomes area, and it is part of the organisation's roadmap in terms of focusing on the future and ensuring that we are positioned to meet the challenges of growth and change, but also optimise those opportunities as well. And it's very much about refocusing on the future and looking to deliver positive impacts. In the report, which Mr. Park will go through, this work has been undertaken in the last 24 months. So thinking about the amount of work and the strategic importance to our shire and the region as a whole, it is quite a significant report. And I think the officers have done a great job in threading the pieces together to assist people to understand how all the different studies actually relate, and then will inform the review of the LEP and supporting local environment plan and the supporting development control plans, or DCPs. Mr. Park, if you'd like to introduce.
Thank you, General Manager. I think you stole my thunder a little bit, but I'll quickly go through the report. So, as the General Manager said, the report relates to the Strategic Outcomes Works program and a really key body of work that's required to ensure that we have a planning framework that's fit for purpose and ensure that we have a planning framework that delivers for our community and what our community needs. So yes, in relation to housing, but also in relation to protecting environmental lands, in relation to having a best practice planning framework that supports primary production on land, so supports economic development, supports infrastructure, supports the cultural development within our communities. So, as the General Manager highlighted, over the last 24 months, my team, with the support of staff across the organisation as well as the government agencies, have undertaken a significant body of work that's outlined in the report. And I'll just touch on a number of really key projects very quickly. I won't go through the report in detail, but I'm really happy to say that we've commenced work on the Southern Highlands Innovation Park Master Plan. So the Southern Highlands Innovation Park is the largest employment precinct south of the Western Sydney Aerotropolis, and a potentially region-shaping precinct that will provide employment not just for locals but for the whole of the region. And we're really excited to get into that body of work with a really good team of consultants working with us. Another really key project that we're working on at the moment is the Bowral South New Living Area Master Plan and Servicing Strategy. And we spoke previously about the Chelsea Gardens Urban Release Area, and this is very much about ensuring that we don't get in the same position again, ensuring that the community have a say in how our new living areas will be developed, ensuring that our new living areas are supported by essential infrastructure, and ensuring that the cost of that infrastructure isn't borne by our existing communities, but rather it's delivered by the people who will generate the demand for and benefit the most from these rezonings, and ensuring that we have a housing stock that meets the needs of our community into the future. So that master planning process is well underway. There'll be the initial community consultation will occur in the coming month, I believe, with formal consultation to occur at the start of the new year. So a really exciting project and a really important project for the future of our shire. What is also covered in the report very briefly is how the infrastructure strategies that we're currently working on will be funded, and looking at the different funding mechanisms to deliver the infrastructure that's required to support not just a growing community but also changing in community expectations. So it looks at the body of work that's being undone in relation to the community recreation facility strategy, the integrated transport strategy, some of those servicing strategies for our new living areas in the SHIP, and how they'll be funded through contributions, voluntary planning agreements, works that are delivered by developers, but also looking at opportunities for things like our property strategy or for grant funding, which we've been quite successful in over the last couple of years.
Thank you, and I can only echo the words of the General Manager and yourself. I think the crux of what's happening is, and I've dealt with this in the administrator minute that I adopted earlier, on page 260, second paragraph, quote, "It is critical that Council continue to take a strategic approach to housing supply so that Council and the community determine how and where the Shire will grow, and to ensure that our growing communities are supported by essential infrastructure." This community does not need any more rezonings foisted on it by the New South Wales Department of Planning. The community needs to take control of its own future. And I would urge any person in this room or watching, or any person generally who is interested in putting their hand up for election in September next year, to read this report carefully, because this is where the action is. This is where you can deliver and make a big difference for your community, and keep out of the day-to-day operations of the council and leave your stamp on the place. Having said that, I'm going to move a slight amendment. I'm happy with 1, 2 and 3. I'm going to add 4. Any unfunded works, as outlined on page 265 of the report, be the subject of consideration of the 2004-2005 budget process. Now, I'm moving that to ensure that the funds are there to continue this work when the new council is elected, so they can make a huge difference to the future of this shire and protect this shire the way that residents want it. Having said that, in relation to item 8.5, Strategic Outcomes Works Program, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 256 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3, and add the 4. Any unfunded works as outlined on page 265 of the report be the subject of consideration of the 2024-25 budget process, and declare that carried. Next item, General Manager, is 9.1 Berrida Road Deviation Project.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Manager Project Delivery, Mr. Trickvick, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to resolve to adjust the budget for the Berrima Road Deviation Project. Whilst this project has a long history and has succumbed to several roadblocks, predominantly from third parties, Council is now in the final stages of completing all of the required enabling works for this project. After lengthy negotiations with Endeavour Energy in relation to changing electrical design standards, it was identified that ground conditions had materially changed from the time of tender. This has resulted from the significant wet and inclement conditions faced over the past year, and is amplified by the constant overland flow from the adjacent retention pond. This has severely impacted on the contractor's ability to access and install the large concrete power poles, and has forced a revised construction methodology and approach to complete the task. Furthermore, network outages between Endeavour Energy and Boral have been planned for several months. Any further deferral to these could result in the completion being delayed indefinitely in anticipation of a window of opportunity. As such, the budget required in this report directly relates to the change construction methodology, ground preparation, and additional specialist plant and equipment required to install the power poles, as well as costs associated with additional network constraints to carry out the electrical augmentation. A funding strategy is outlined in the report, and prudent completion of these enabling works will unlock Council's opportunities to seek further funding for the construction of the Berrima Overpass, and ultimately complementing the strategy for the Southern Highlands Innovation Park.
I'm going to adopt the recommendation, but if the council had have done this work earlier, you say there's now changed ground conditions. The engineering plans that happened originally would have been all good for the changed conditions. You know, hear what I'm trying to say, or?
Yeah, Mr. May, there's numerous elements at play here. One was the many years it took for us to get certification from Endeavour Energy. Another element was the rain, and also Endeavour changed their design standards on us halfway through. So numerous factors have happened which have delayed us being able to do this.
I understand all that. What I'm trying to say is that the engineering solution, if you had have done that, if this had been built 5 or 6 years ago before the change in weather, the engineering solution would have...
Most of the problem goes away, correct.
Okay, thanks very much. Just for interest. In relation to item 9.1, Berrima Road Conservation Area, Berrima Road Deviation Project, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 270 of the business paper 1 and 2, and declare that carried. 9.2 Old South Road, page 273.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. May. Back to Mr. Trickvick. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to seek approval to proceed with a direct engagement of Mossvale Concrete Products for the provision of custom box culverts for stage 3 of the Old South Road project. At the ordinary meeting of Council dated 19 July 2023, Council resolved to proceed with the additional 1.3 kilometres of road rehabilitation, known as Stage 3, on Old South Road and being north of Almerton Road in Mittagong. Council is nearing completion of the detailed design, and whilst undertaking our environmental obligations by way of a review of environmental factors, it was identified that there were signs of roostings of a threatened species of microbat, also known as Myotis macropus. Council Specialist Consultant has advised that a key protocol to the management of this potential habitat is that works must strictly be undertaken in accordance with seasonal breeding, and as such work must be completed by early October of this year, or will be delayed until May 24. Council wishes to leverage off the momentum of works currently being undertaken, and as such to complete the works as defined by the review of environmental factors. Immediate purchase of these culverts is required. The culverts are a custom manufactured product with extremely long lead times. Council has confirmed that these culverts can be supplied in time, but cannot afford the time associated with undertaking a tender process as outlined in the procurement guidelines. After validating costings with the market and consultation with the Office of Local Government, Section 55 Clause 3.1 of the Local Government Act is applicable and states that a contract where, because of extenuating circumstances, remoteness of locality, or the unavailability or competitive or reliable tenders, a council decides by resolution that a satisfactory result would not be achieved by tenders. As such, this report requests that the resolution to procure the culverts via direct engagement at a cost of $256,000 for the timely installation and adherence to the microbat management plan to avoid further delays and to complete the proposed works on Old South Road.
Thanks very much for that. The Old South Road project is coming along nicely, and residents are very happy, even with it closed, in anticipation of what they're going to be able to drive on when it's finished, all the way up to the old Hume Highway. In relation to item 9.2, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 273 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. General Manager, item 9.3, integrated library management system tender.
Yep, thank you, Mr. May. So, Ms. Badgett to your left, I'm the Manager, Community Life and Libraries. So this is her first introduction, so please be gentle. We'll speak to the library systems. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Thank you, Mr. May. So this report presents the evaluation of tenders received for a new integrated library management system and seeks approval to accept the tender from Civica Pty Limited as the provider of the new system. So Mr. May, Council's libraries have been using the current library system for over 20 years, and we're one of only 2 libraries in New South Wales that currently use this system. The current system provider has advised Council that they'll no longer be supporting any upgrades to this system. So as such, whilst the current system satisfied our business needs years ago, current community and customer expectations are expecting more of our library systems. When our customers want and need a system that is contemporary, is responsive, and of course a system that will be upgraded and technically supported. So our customers want to see access to their library catalogue, for example, through their libraries, but also their mobile, their iPads, or even their computers at home. So as outlined in the background of this report, the benefits of implementing the new library management system are numerous, but I just want to focus on 3 of them. By providing a new library management system, we'll be providing a new intuitive system, easy to use for our customers, and one that provides a positive customer experience. So customers, when logged into their accounts, can receive recommendations based on items they have borrowed. They can add reviews. They can even be at a local bookshop or Kmart or Target or wherever and scan an ISBN item with their camera on their phone and check whether we have the book in our libraries. So that revolutionises the way we currently have our library systems working. The system will also help to future-proof the library in regard to local studies. So I'm not sure whether everyone's aware, but we have quite a big local studies collection, but it's all in analogue. None of it's been digitised. So the new module within this system will enable us to digitise our local studies collection. And lastly, the system itself will improve efficiencies for staff. So this may help then staff not to have to find workarounds. It has reports, etc. So what that will enable is that our staff can then focus on new programs or services instead of focusing on the old system. So most libraries actually review their library systems every 5 to 10 years. So it's timely that we implement a new system to meet the needs of our customers and community. Thank you.
Did I hear you right that the current system is 20 years old?
Yes, Mr. May, that's correct.
And the local histories collection is still in effect in hard form, hasn't been digitised?
That's correct.
Look, I won't ask you the question, I don't want to embarrass you. I would move in relation to item, and I'm not devaluing your role, I'm very thankful, but this has obviously started before you've arrived, but I just find it bewildering. In relation to item 9.3, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 276 of the business paper 1, 2 and 3 and declare that carried. Thank you. 9.4, the operational plan, General Manager.
Yep, thank you, Mr. May. Ms. Lidgard, the Manager Governance and Corporate Performance, will present this item, and and with our acting CFO, we have a short presentation. Whilst the CFO and the Manager Governance and Corporate Performance are actually speaking to this item, it is a reflection of the work of all of the organisation over the last quarter and the achievements and leadership of the managers and the executive and their relevant teams. So I'll hand over to Mr. Conrad first, and then Ms. Lidgard. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. While we load the presentation, for purpose of today's financial update, we'd like to share with Council that we've had 4 successful grant applications in the 3 months ending June, totaling some $7.7 million. While there were 5 unsuccessful grants, these only amounted to $1.3 million. I'm going to highlight of the contested grants. Council received Moss Vale State Emergency Facility Grant of $1.5 million, which will go towards the funding of part of the animal shelter and the SS building. That was $1.5 million, and also we received funding towards the NAIDOC flag raising ceremony held on 3rd of July, as well as the Strong Start Cadetship Program, which aims to provide a strong foundation for aspiring planners. Yeah. Cool. The outcome of the grant application on the floodplain management system is still pending, or was still pending at that time. A more detailed financial update will be provided to the Council when the financial statements are presented in August. September, sorry. I'll hand over to the Manager Governance and Corporate Performance for an update on the operational plan.
Thank you. This is the final report on the operational plan for 22-23, and at the end of the June quarter, 97.8% of all deliverables across the 5 themes of the CSP were considered on track. The remainder 2.2% of deliverables were delayed. So on the screen you can see the deliverables that were delayed. The first one relates to farmland policy priority rating review. So the revised farmland policy has been drafted, and following an internal review, it's been subject to an independent external review to ensure that it's fair and reasonable. The external policy review and subsequent rating review process will continue and will be completed in 23-24 financial year. Forward design of footpaths, shared paths and cycleways. These works were scheduled to be completed in the first quarter of 23-24. The works that will be undertaken in the following locations: Erridge Park Road in Bowral and in Burradoo, Robertson Road in Moss Vale, Mittagong North Walking Network. Overall, this project will provide more than 2.2 of new footpaths kilometres. The draft Resource Recovery Centre Site Master Plan, The draft master plan was developed during the June quarter and is being finalised along with quantity estimates for works. The regional project tender waste disposal contract negotiations were progressed and are in the final stages. The final contract arrangements will be presented to council within 3 months. So this slide just presents you with some of the highlights from the quarter. So some of the key highlights were the community reference panel. So the induction of the council's 4 newly established community reference panels in the following focus areas of climate change and environment, community, sports, recreation and leisure and economy were held in April, and then subsequent meetings were held in June. The panels are a key community engagement mechanism for council. Youth Week was also held in April, and I've got another slide which will give you a little bit more detail about that. But there was a full program of events and activities that was supported and organised and delivered through Youth Week in April. Council successfully prepared and promoted a program of events run by both council and other groups in the Highlands, such as Highlands Youth Services and Reframe. The New South Wales Graffiti Management Program, Council secured funding through the New South Wales Graffiti Management Program on behalf of the Hilltop Community Association for the security and beautification project at Boronia Park. The New South Wales Graffiti Management Grant Program aims to boost community confidence and safety by preventing and minimising graffiti vandalism. The Road Safety Program, Council was successful in receiving funding from Transport from New South Wales for the 22-23 Road Safety Program, comprising of 6 events and programs. There was also the launch of Barrel Memorial Hall. So a launch event was held at the new hall on the 6th of June, and Her Excellency, the Honourable Margaret Beasley, the Governor of New South Wales, was in attendance. She assisted by the cutting of the red ribbon to commemorate the opening of the hall. The $8 million refurbishment was funded by Council and the Australian Government. The hall now stands as a Southern Highlands premier multi-purpose cultural event centre. And Council also entered into a contract for the delivery of the Wingecarribee Animal Shelter and Mossvale SES in June. Works are expected to commence this month. So as I mentioned earlier, Youth Week was also held for 2023, and that was from the 20th to the 30th of April with 160 attendants. Council received a Youth Opportunities Grants from the Department of Communities and Justice to run a full program of creative multimedia arts events led by young people, for young people. Activities in Youth Week included a ceramics workshop, a circus workshop, vocal muster workshop, barista training, Who Are You workshop run through Southern Highlands Youth Arts Council, Laneway Arts, and a Laneway Arts workshop. In terms of significant projects that were completed during the quarter, Station Street renewal was completed, so work on the renewal began in April 2022, along with road reconstruction. This work was completed in May 2023. There was also some play space projects that were also completed during the quarter. Council has completed 2 extensive upgrades of the Mossvale Church Road Oval Playground and Mittagong Cook Street Playground. Wheelchair access ramps, sensory play stations are among the new features integrated into the colourful design, along with safe and modern net swings and slides, seesaws and nature plays. There's also been some significant consultation during the quarter. So the main consultations that were held through the period were the Mountain Bike Community Survey that had 535 contributions, the Southern Highlands Botanic Gardens Plan of Management, which had 181 contributions, the Draft Operational Plan, Resourcing Strategy and Delivery Program had 41 contributions, and the Domestic Waste Services for Rural Property Owners had 361 contributions. Council's online consultation platform received over 11,000 visits during the reporting period, with over 7,000 visitors exploring the specific details of the consultation. Just over 1,452 surveys and submission forms and interactive maps were also completed during the quarter. And that's the final slide.
Well, I think that certainly shows the amount of work that's been done by the entire team at the council. And, you know, I can't add much more to it. I've read it all, and I think they're all great outcomes in moving this shire forward. In relation to item 9.4, the operational plan, 22-23, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 22 of the business paper and declare that carried. General Manager revotes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. May. Back to Mr. Conrad. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Annually, councils prepare their budget and long-term financial plans based on programs, projects and project stages that are expected to be delivered during that financial year. These budget allocations normally lapse at the end of that financial year. The purpose of the revotes is to ensure, if appropriate, the funding is carried over to complete these projects in the following year. The projects listed in the revotes list attached to the report had not been completed as of 30th of June 2023. The detailed revote list presents operating and capital projects and programs across the general water and sewer funds. In summary, there were 128 projects across these funds, with $4.8 million in operating projects, which were largely grant funded, and $11.2 million worth of capital projects, totaling $60 million worth of revotes. The 2023-24 capital program budget would increase to $95.3 million from the already approved program of works of $84.2 million. This revised capital program has been assessed to still be deliverable within the 2023-24 financial year. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you. It was a bit of a challenge to read some of this, but I got through it. And look, and basically what you're saying is most of this is loans, grants and commitments where there's contracts already signed, etc., etc.
Yep.
There is one item that did catch my attention, and that is the portal for elected members, and I'm going to move the officer's recommendation as number 1, and then add at the September 2023 council meeting a demonstration be given on how the elected members portal will operate. I could have just asked for one myself, but I think it's important that people who may be going to run for council start to see, you know, how the council does run and operate. So having said that, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 346 of the business paper, adding number 2 as on the screen, and declare that carried. 9.6, rates and charges to be written off.
Thank you, Mr. May. Back to Mr. Conrad. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. This report highlights some of the write-off subsidies and rebates that Wingecarribee Shire Council has provided to its residents and ratepayers during the 22-23 financial year. The total amounts written off during this year was $1.7 million, and I'd just like to highlight 2 of those write-offs, or categories of write-offs. Council provided pensioner rebates under Section 583 amounting to $1.6 million, but we are expecting 55% of that to be recovered. And then under the water determination policy, we wrote off $132,000. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you. In relation to item 9.6, rates and charges written off for the last financial year, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 356 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, and declare that carried. 9.7, sundry debtor write-off.
Thank you, Mr. May. Last item. Thank you, Mr. Conrad.
Thank you, General Manager. This report advises Council of a sundry debt to be written off in accordance with Local Government Regulation 2021. It is a requirement under the Act that any debts being proposed to be written off above the General Manager's delegation must be resolved by Council. In this case, a single debt is recommended for write-off, with details provided in the attachment amounting to $1,713.50, as the company in question was deregistered in December 2021. In keeping with past practice, the identifying information has been kept confidential, as both companies and individual debts may be presented for write-off in these write-off reports. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you. I think when dealing with these kind of reports, there has to be an assessment made on whether it should be confidential or not. I actually take the view that this shouldn't be confidential. I think it would be public information that the company, what was the terminology used? The receivership, or what was it?
They deregistered.
Deregistered, yeah. That would be public information. So I'm only going to move clause 1 of the recommendation. So in relation to item 9.7, sundry debt write-off report, I'd move the officer's recommendation number 1 on page 360 of the business paper and declare that carried. Having said that, I think we need to be careful when presenting these kind of reports to council, because obviously there are hardship matters. So I think the staff need to deal with it on a case-by-case basis, just not, that's the way we used to do it. 355, Management Committees, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Chief Information Officer, Mr. Harb, will speak to this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. Administrator, the purpose of this report is to seek endorsement for the Section 355 Management Committee's Procedures Manual, a crucial step towards enhancing our operational efficiency and clarity in roles and responsibilities. Council recognises the important part volunteers and community groups play in providing services whilst managing our council facilities. A review of the 355 Management Committee was undertaken by the consultant David Ackroyd from August to November 2021, and a report submitted to Council in December 2021. The endorsement of the Procedures Manual and the implementation of these recommendations will significantly contribute to the overall success of our Council by establishing a standardised framework and providing necessary training and ensuring transparency. By this, we are setting the stage for increased efficiency, collaboration and informed decision making. Thank you.
Look, this has not been an easy matter. I wasn't overly impressed by the Ackroyd report, or sections of it. I think the report generally was pretty valuable, but sections of it. So I have visited all but 3 of the 355 committees, and those 3 are proving difficult to. I was supposed to have a meeting tonight, actually, at the Barrawang pub with one of them, but they've cancelled because some people are sick. Maybe the soccer took over, I'm not sure. But look, it's been an absolute eye-opener and a pleasure to see the volunteering that goes on with so many of these 355 committees, the dedication and commitment to local communities of these people. And you never poke a volunteer in the eye. You embrace them and respect them. And, you know, I think we've all learnt, and so have the volunteers, valuable lessons through this process of the council's need for statutory enforcement of the Local Government Act. So look, as I say, this has not been an easy matter. I thank the staff for also taking the time and listening to the concerns of the committees, and the committees for the work they do. You know, the council couldn't do it. It's as simple as that. If they all walked away. And I see in the report that you're talking about putting Wi-Fi and defibrillators, if you can,
Yes.
at particularly village halls, and the defibrillators is suggesting be on the outside of the hall, not the inside.
Correct, Mr. Administrator.
Yeah, and that's obviously, so in villages, that kind of facility would be available in an emergency. Well, I think it's a credit to the staff to be doing this kind of stuff, and I know it will be acknowledged and appreciated by the villagers in particular. I'm going to play around with the recommendation just a bit, but I generally support it. I'll have a new number 1. It's on the screen. That council note the administrators arrange visits to all Section 355 committees as required by the 21 September 2022 resolution. That's just to close that off, to acknowledge that there's only the 3 to go, but they're under control. 2, there be no further action implementing the recommendations related to Section 355 committees from the Community Advisory and Section 355 Community Review Final Report, November 2021. In effect, that's the Ackroyd report. Number 3 is the original number 1 in the officer's recommendation. Council endorses the procedures for the 355 management committees. Number 4 becomes number 2. Council notes all 355 management committees members will be trained on the revised procedures manual. Number 5, the memorandum of understanding be endorsed, stating that it will be signed by the General Manager. 6 becomes your old number 3. 7, the General Manager liaise with Section 355 committees in relation regarding maintenance items and priorities, and that the funds be provided in the current budget. Just some general observations. There's $160,000 in the current budget, as I understand, or $120,000 in the current budget, which will address a lot of small things these committees have been waiting years for, which haven't happened, and they're all getting their priorities together at the moment. So there's that issue. In relation to the procedures manual, it's now got a KISS section at the front, which is just the major issues for the committees to deal with. And if all else fails, look at the index and have a look at the other 40 pages, and you'll be able to find it readily. So we're trying to take the pain out of the work for them. And in relation to the 355 committees entering into memorandums of understanding to be signed by the General Manager, that relates to the fact that if a future council was to wind up the 355 committees, which I think is unlikely, but if they fall over, and they all acknowledge the fact that no one's getting younger and volunteers are getting harder to find, that any monies held by the committees would not go back into the council's general funds. They would be maintained and held by the committees, and I think they're all very, very happy with that. So look, I think at the end of the day, it's been a slow process but a worthwhile process. I'm not going to, it's up on the screen, I'm not going to read it again. So I declare that carried. Next item, Agency Information Guide, 419, General Manager.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. May. Ms. Lidgard, the Manager Governance and Corporate Performance, will introduce this item.
Thank you, General Manager. This report presents Council's Agency Information Guide for 23-24 for adoption. The Agency Information Guide provides a mechanism to ensure the community have knowledge of and access to government information that is both current and significant in relation to the formulation of policy and service delivery by agencies, together with access arrangements to participate in the formulation of policy and service delivery by agencies. The guide connects the community and council by providing clear and accessible guidelines on accessing government information and encouraging public participation in council decision making and functions. Section 21 of the GIP Act requires agencies to review their agency information guides every 12 months. A review of Council's Agency Information Guide has now been completed, and the revised document is included in attachment 1 to this report. The most significant changes to the document are the inclusion of the role of the administrator, updated organisational structure, and the inclusion of information about Council's community reference panels and Council's professional conduct coordinator. All mandatory information is included in the draft document, as well as additional information that is recommended but not mandatory for inclusion. It's recommended that the draft agency information guide be adopted.
This is a statutory obligation on the part of the council. I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 419 of the business paper and declare that carried. Item 910, upstairs area at the Barrel Memorial Hall and the Sutton Forest Hall.
Thank you, Mr. May. So the Manager Business and Property Services, Mr. Kloppers, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. May, colleagues and those on the feed. This report seeks the approval to undertake community consultation in relation to the proposed schedule of hire fees for the office space located on the first floor of the Barrel Memorial Hall, as well as the hall space at Sutton Forest Hall. And with regards to the Barrel Memorial Hall, Mr. May, post refurbishing the upstairs office area has been identified as a possible site for lease and subject to the adoption of a plan of management. Mr. May, you will note that there's currently no plan of management for that building, meaning that although we cannot sign the lease over the years, we can introduce fees. As such, the intention to establish fees and charges-based mechanism is intended to facilitate the use until the plan of management can be adopted. The fees included in this item was arrived at by averaging 3 market appraisals. Use would still need a user agreement and possibly other approvals depending. The item today asks for permission to advertise the proposed fees and charges for 28 days, seeking comments from the public. Regarding the proposed fees and charges for the front section of the Sutton Forest Hall, Mr. May, the Imaginata Group have had sole access to that section of the hall by way of a now expired licence with sporadic use. Mr. May, by introducing user fees and charges for the hall, we're aiming to create the equity of access and equality of use. Current users can remain users, but we will be able to make the hall available to other parties also through the booking mechanism. We've informed the current users both by writing to them as well as discussing the matter telephonically with them and noted that they can make submissions should they feel the need to. We're happy to take any additional questions.
Look, I don't know whether you'll be able to answer this one. Is the land on which both of these facilities built operational or community? Yeah, look, it's probably.
It is community land, so I understand.
Yeah, thank you. I think the people in Sutton Forest in particular, or users who have had their eye on this facility and have been locked out for a long time, will be quite happy with this. So in relation to item 9.1, I'd move the officer's recommendation 1 and 2 as outlined on page 442 of the business paper and declare it carried. Road naming policy.
Thank you, Mr. May. So the acting manager assets will speak to the next couple of items. Mr. Anwar.
Hello, Mr. May. Nice to meet you. Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement of the road naming policy to be placed on public exhibition. The existing road naming policy was last updated in 1998 and linked to the 1998 version of guidelines of the New South Wales address policy that laid out the procedures of road naming across all local government LGAs in New South Wales. The existing policy now contains outdated references and duplicates information contained within the geographical names board's address policy and user manual. The proposed updates to the road naming policy provide a concise document to support council in the road naming function and provide great guidance to developers and local community alike. The proposed updates to the road naming policy have ensured the outdated references have been updated and now aligns with the Geographical Names Board's address policy and user manual.
Thank you, and it's nice to be able to put a face to a name too. I see your name floating around. It's been a quarter of a century since the council last updated this policy.
It would appear that way, Mr. May.
Look, I'm happy to move items 1 and 2, and look, it's probably, if it was a big issue, I wouldn't do it, but I want to add a number 3 to this because I'm told the council doesn't have a policy in relation to the naming of other public space or council facilities, which is astounding. So I'm going to add a number 3. A policy be developed for public exhibition for the naming of any public space or facility under the care, control and management of council. You wouldn't normally do that because it's unrelated, but I think I can get away because it's not significant. So I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 446 of the business paper, 1, 2 and 3, or 3 is my one, and declare that carried. Southern Highlands Botanic Garden.
Back to you, Mr. Anwar.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement for the Southern Highlands Botanic Garden Plan of Management to be placed on public exhibition. In accordance with Local Government Act, councils are required to develop plans of management for all community land under their responsibility. The purpose of the plan of management is to further categorise the land and develop guidelines or action plans to ensure the effective management of the land in accordance with the categorisation. The potential categorisations are either park, sports field, general use, cultural significance or natural area. This plan of management will enshrine the categorisation of the Southern Highlands Botanic Gardens as a mixture of general community use, park and natural area watercourse, aligning with the 2013 master plan, which received development consent from Council in September 2013. This refinement, Mr. May, of the plan of management ensures that all strategic documents which govern usage of the site are now in alignment and so assist in removing potential hurdles to realising the full potential of the reserve, as well as strengthening business cases for grant funding opportunities.
I did raise this matter with the Director in relation to Clause 4. Do you want to add the other section of the Act? I think...
Yeah, that should be there.
Sorry, Mr. May, can I just ask the Director to clarify? Can you just talk to the point? Thank you.
I'm sorry.
So a section was added to the resolution. It should be up there.
You just can't add it. You've got to order the staff recommendation.
Yeah, but like we did add it, didn't we, Danielle?
Just so residents know, if you read section 36.4 in isolation,
Yes.
it relates to section 40.
40A.
40A.
Yeah.
You
Subsection
need
1.
the other one just to make
Yeah.
close the loop. And this will be an amended officer's recommendation, not mine. Great. So in the minutes, you'll have the officer's recommendation, you'll have a bit of preamble about the director's advice that you need this extra clause, and then print that. I would move that the officer's amended recommendation 1, 2, 3 and 4 be carried. The Heritage Rail Loop upgrade, General Manager.
Yes, back to Mr. Anwar, a big first night for you, the Heritage Rail Loop line update. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the Loop Line upgrade project being delivered by Transport Heritage New South Wales and the associated council projects. The Loop Line upgrade project will see the reactivation of the rail line between Buxton and Collaval for the purpose of a weekly heritage train service. As part of the project, Transport Heritage New South Wales will be undertaking major works at Hilltop to create a new train station and supporting facilities, as well as minor works to the existing Collaval train station. To assist in the activation of Hilltop train station, it is intended that Council and the Hilltop Community Association partner together for the delivery of a new play space in this more central location, which will serve as a replacement for the Waratah Park play space. Construction of the play space is included within the 2023-24 Capital Works program. However, commencement is still pending finalisation of discussions with Transport Heritage New South Wales and Transport Asset Holding Entity Tahi as the to leasing arrangement. As part of Transport Heritage New South Wales construction of Hilltop train station, they are envisaging the inclusion of a public toilet facility. However, have indicated that they will require support from Council if it is to operate outside the hours of the weekly heritage train service. Council officers have confirmed Council's support of the notion in principle and now awaiting formal proposal from Transport Heritage New South Wales.
To be clear on this matter, the council did commit funds to assist should the Transport Heritage not come to the party. But the Hilltop Community Committee were of the view, and I agree with them, that why have toilets on its station that are going to be used once, are going to be open once a week. So the negotiations were originally that we would try and get the toilets relocated into the park, but I think more recently, from what I'm told, the toilets will be on the station fronting the park. And if necessary, the council may have to put some money in because you just don't want one toilet. We do have a commitment to the Hilltop community that we will do our best to get facilities. This is really going very slowly, this loop line project, and I think they're hitting all kinds of obstacles. But look, I agree with the recommendation, but I want to add a number 2, that Council reiterate its commitment, reiterate it is committed to securing public toilets that are accessible to residents 7 days a week as part of the Loop Line upgrade project, and continues to liaise with Transport Asset Holding Entity and Transport Heritage New South Wales to achieve this outcome. Further, the support of the member for Wallandilly be sought. And I'll declare that carried. 9.14, the Mossvale bypass.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Manager Project Delivery, Mr. Tripkovic. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to obtain resolution in relation to Council's intent to withdraw from the $5.77 million application via the Growing Local Economies Fund for Stage 1 of the Mossvale bypass construction. In November 2018, Council was awarded the $5.77 million with conditions being fixed and specific to the construction of Stage 1. In parallel, Council's negotiations with the New South Wales Government and Transport for New South Wales culminated in the allocation of $3.5 million to advance investigations and commence designs for the bypass. At the meeting dated 16 March of 2022, Council resolved to proceed with the design of all 3 stages of the proposed bypass due to numerous compelling reasons, most specifically to minimise the impact on local traffic if only stage 1 was to be constructed. In February of 2023, concept designs had been complete and accompanied by a quantity survey, forecasting costs to complete all 3 stages of construction at $197 million. Considering the overall cost to construct and the decision to proceed with all 3 stages, Council is not able to comply with the fixed conditions of the GLE grant. Furthermore, the strict conditions of the grant prohibit it being utilised for any other project or purpose, and as such, withdrawal is recommended. The withdrawal of the grant is in no way reflective of the importance of the project, and it is to be noted that Council remains steadfast in its commitment to delivering all 3 stages of construction and continue to actively seek support and funding partners to bring the Mossvale bypass to fruition. Thank you.
If we just do the stage 1, which is in the centre of stages 2 and 3, I don't know how that happens, but that did happen, it would create rat runs, in effect, through the residential areas of Mossvale. I understand all that. You haven't got a pass comment on this, but there's parallels with this and Station Street. As I understand it, unless we agree to return the $5.777 million, we're committing to the $197 million project. In much the same way that if we didn't return the 4.2 at Bowral, we were committing to $33 million project. Is that an unfair comparison, or?
In effect, that's a valid comparison, Mr. May.
And look, and I hear what you say, that the council's commitment. This is by far, in my view, the most important piece of infrastructure, road infrastructure in the Shire. I remember when I first came, they were talking about the Mossvale bypass, and I was shown some plans, and I thought, this is not a bypass. But when you read the traffic information and the effect on Argyle Street of this work, I think it's a 30% reduction in traffic flows on Argyle Street.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. May. Just wish to clarify that we are foregoing the $5.777 million because it would commit us to constructing Mossvale bypass, but it was only relating to stage 1 only, just so we're clear. And as council has previously been advised, and as the manager just said, it would create a rat run. But also we have a council resolution based on the fact that it would create an adverse outcome for residents if only constructed as a stage 1, and also looking at the feasibility and efficiency of doing it in a 3-stage process. So we have a council resolution that says we'll deliver Mossvale bypass as one project and advocate to the state government along that line. Just wish to clarify, Mr. May.
Yeah. I understand completely. The residents spoke and we listened. But I would want to add something to the end of number 3. Number 4, I mean. So I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation on page 524 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3 and 4, but adding to number 4, including advocating to the federal and state members, plural, to fund the construction of this important project. And declare that carried. Mittagong Playhouse.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Conrad, the acting CFO, will speak to the item. However, I would ask that either the director or the manager speak to the points Mr. Anstey made after Mr. Conrad introduces the financial side of it. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Council has submitted the expression of interest to the Federal Growing Regions Fund seeking 50% or $4 million in grant funding for the Mittagong Playhouse restoration and refurbishment project. The total estimated costs for this project are over $8 million, or just over. In responding to a part of Mr. Anstey's comments during the public forum earlier today, I'm unfortunately not in a position to comment on the changes in scope of the project over time. However, from the changes in cost estimates, these are largely driven and attributable to varying costs and inflation. In preparing the expression of interest, the project delivery team presented the cost estimates of $7.5 million, which was then escalated by CPI of 7%, just for purposes of the EOI. The cost of the project will still be subject to a full tender process. In terms of funding strategy for this project, currently there's $2 million of council funds allocated to the project through loan funds. However, for purposes of the expression of interest, council is required to commit funding of 50% at the EOI stage. A revised funding strategy sees an increase in loan funding to be sourced by $2 million to supplement the existing funding. One of the important debt-related ratios is the debt service cover ratio, which basically means how often can council service its borrowing costs, principal, and interest with its operating result. In the current LTFP, the debt service ratio in 2025 and 26 is a healthy 13.7. 25-26, that's when we're planning on drawing down on these loans. By including the additional $2 million loan, this will reduce to 12.9. The benchmark for debt and service cover ratio is a multiple of greater than 2. With additional loans proposed, the debt service ratio will remain well above the benchmark of 2 for the remainder of the LTFP. In presenting the revised funding strategy, Council will continue to advocate for additional funding from state and other funding sources to supplement the grant and loan funding allocated to the Mittagong Playhouse Restoration Refurbishment Project. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
We can come to Mr. Ansie's stuff in a minute, some financial. Are you saying that if we borrow the extra $2 million, it puts us over the state recommended average for local government borrowings?
No, so the benchmark is 2, so
Yeah.
the multiple is 2. And we would be sitting as, so over 2, so the benchmark should be anything higher than 2, and we're sitting at 13.7 at the moment, so very healthy. So anything less than 2 is no longer meeting that benchmark.
Okay, sorry,
Yeah,
I misunderstood what you were saying. So my calculation is we're well under.
Yeah.
It's the capacity to repay, it's the question.
So we're exceeding the benchmark in a good way.
Yes.
So we're above the line, not below the line.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
So if we had the capacity to repay, we could borrow a lot more money, but that's the capacity to repay that's the challenge. I understand. Okay, we can deal with Mr. Ansie's matters. Who's going to deal with them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think we need to take some of the issues raised by Mr. Ansie on notice and come back to that.
So generally, what are they?
So Mr. Ansie did raise some concerns in relation to the costs that were stated on the DA approval and the current cost. And he also raised some suggestions for moving the project forward in a different manner.
If there's a $5 million limit under which a council matter can be dealt with internally, you might have to take legal advice on this, because does that apply when you have a panel dealing with a matter?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I think we do need to take it on notice. The points that will come back to council with a report on is the cost estimate for the project and the escalation, the DA and the approval path pending the value of the project. There was the matter of heritage, and I think Mr. Anstey was suggesting paring back the building to reveal the original house that's in the middle of the playhouse, for those that know. And I think the concept of whether an open-air amphitheatre meets the needs of the theatre groups, that we haven't tested that. I believe they're the key issues.
I don't want to get the council involved in the community having concerns whether the council is going to take this matter forward. And so I really do think you can not do much in relation to the idea of an open-air theatre on the site. But I do think we need to get more information in relation to what Mr Ansie's raised about heritage, and in particular his concerns about the ability of the council's panel dealing with this matter, recognising that the council has not dealt with the matter. And I think that would be critical to this. So have you got a suggestion? I want to move the recommendation because I do think we've got to take this forward. And there's opportunities later if the council, through the community, so decides. But at this stage, I want to keep going. As I understand it, we are meeting with the member for Whitlam the week after next, and the member for Wallandilly the week after that. They're both particularly interested because of community representations they're getting about the future of the Playhouse. It's gone on for too long. I think the staff are finding another $2 million because I can't see us getting much more than $4 million out of federal funds, but this has to be addressed. But so that the concerns of Mr Anstey can be addressed, I think we need a number 4. Yes, go for your life. Yeah.
May I suggest that a number 4 be that a further report, that a further report be provided at the next meeting on the Mittagong Playhouse to address, and then if we can say A, the cost of the project, B, the planning pathway,
Planning approvals pathway.
a planning approvals pathway, C, heritage. Does that capture it? So I might just ask the director, communities in place, in relation to the planning number B. Are you comfortable with that, or do you have a suggestion?
General Manager, no, I think that covers what's the question that was raised, was the planning approvals pathways. And the third one, I'd suggest just heritage, or confirming the heritage significance of the site.
At the 3... But I think Mr Anstey was raising the heritage significance of the 3 individual parts rather than the one. And, no doubt that's been dealt with, I would hope, in the DA planning process. But let's get some more information. I don't support looking at having an open-air theatre. I just think that will cause concerns in the community whether the council is fair dinkum with this project when we are. As how we do it as a 3 sector is the question. Yeah. think that addresses 3 of the 4 matters that were generally raised. So I'd move the officer's recommendation 1, 2, 3 and 4 on the screen and declare that carried. Recreational walking tracks update.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Acting Manager Assets, Mr. Anwar, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the funding and implementation of the recreational walking track strategy as requested at the 28th of June extraordinary council meeting. The recreational walking track strategy was adopted in 2020 and identified the 28 walking tracks across 16 reserves in the Shire. The strategy identified the walking track network suffers from shortcomings of lack of signage, maintenance, and information and promotional materials. And so I developed a 5-pronged action plan to address them. There has unfortunately been limited progress on the implementation of the action plan to date. $137,000 budget featured in the 2021-22 capital program for commencement for signage upgrades as per the strategy. However, this project has carried over to 2022-23 and now to 2023-24. In light of the damage of the trails have experienced from the 2022 natural disasters, the $137,000 is now intended to be invested in the rectification works required to enable the reopening of the tracks connected to the Boxvale trailhead. Thank you.
I'm going to move the officer's recommendation because it's only just noting what is the council staff are proposing, but I acknowledge that I'm more than happy to meet Mr. Anstey and on site. The picture paints 1,000 words. So in relation to item 9.16, recreational walking track strategy update, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 532 of the business paper and declare that carried. 9.17, insurance pool membership.
Yep.
General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. I'm back to Ms. Lidgard, Manager Governance and Corporate Performance.
Thank you, General Manager. At the Council meeting on the 12th of May 2021, Council resolved to undertake a review of its insurance pool membership and coverage. Given the length of time since the resolution, this report is providing a status update to Council on the review progress. Work is currently in progress with the review, and a further report will be provided to Council on the outcomes of the review by November 2023.
And look, I note on page 536, it's acknowledged that it should have been actioned in the 2021-22 year, and I appreciate that. In relation to item 9.17, insurance pool membership, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 536 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. 9.18, rates, water and sewer subsidy scheme review. General Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. May. Before Mr. Conrad, the Acting CFO, introduces this item, just wish to table an email that was received from the President of the Burrawang School of Arts this afternoon in relation to this matter from Mr. Elvey.
Thank you, General Manager. At its meeting on 28th of June 2023, Council resolved that a further report be presented to Council in relation to the impact that the revised Rates, Water and Sewerage Access Subsidy Scheme guidelines would have on existing recipients. One of the reasons why the previous scheme and policy was retired in November 2022 was the application of the policy appeared neither transparent nor consistent in some instances. One of the requirements in particular was that there be no commercial purpose or activity at the property, which is a term open for interpretation. The revised guidelines eliminate this factor and instead only continue to require that the applicant provide a service which is available and of benefit to the residents of Windsor-Carriby Shire without exclusions, and by providing the service, the group will relieve council of the need of providing that service. Under the former policy, 2 subsidy categories remain unaffected, and with the revised scheme guidelines. 22 religious bodies received a 50% rebate up to the maximum of $500, or 11% of the total subsidy amount. 17 Category B recipients received 50% rebate of up to the maximum of $500, or 13% of the total allocated subsidy amount. 77% of the subsidy amount was allocated to 9 Category A applicants, where 100% of the rebate was provided, and this group would be adversely affected by the $500 maximum imposed or proposed. So it is acknowledged that there will be significant impacts on these 9 recipients of the former Category 9 subsidy, Category A subsidy, sorry. However, the broadening of the guidelines also presents an opportunity for more not-for-profit, registered charities and religious bodies to apply and receive a subsidy. It is important to note that the revised guidelines are in no way intended to disenfranchise the community volunteers or community groups, but are intended to broaden the reach of the scheme. Until applications are actually received and evaluated, it is unknown how many applications will be received under the broadened guidelines. Having said that, there were some 48 not-for-profit entities active in the LGA, as well as 63 clubs and associations. Only 48 subsidy applications were approved for the 2022-23 financial year. So there are more organisations that would be able to apply for the subsidy scheme. In considering correspondence received and tabled recently, some discrepancies have been highlighted, and I would like to amend the recommendation 3 of the council report by adding and address possible anomalies where the use relates to a community hall. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
That becomes an amended staff recommendation,
Yes.
and you're suggesting that because of submissions you've received which are showing anomalies you hadn't thought of, in effect.
It's
Yes.
a new guideline, in short, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, thanks for that, because I was going to, I didn't know what to do with I don't understand how Robinson School of Arts pays rates and borrowing Hall, I think it might be School of Arts, the council just wrote them off. No consistency, no transparency, no fairness. So I think that's a very, very good decision. So what will happen is, when you get the submissions in, there'll be another report to council addressing some of what you've identified as a concern, in effect.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. In relation to item 9.18, I would move the officer's amended recommendation, adding and address possible anomalies where the use relates to a community hall, and declare that carried. Investments report on page 919 of the business paper. I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 552 of the business paper and declare that carried. Item 9.20, the Canberra Regional Organisation minutes, on page 559 of the business paper. I would move that that the officer's recommendation, as outlined on page 559 of the business paper, be carried. The Traffic Committee, I've got some concerns about this one. There's no introduction, so I can just go. I had a concern that the minutes for April and June have taken so long to get to council, but I've been told why, and I accept that. but I do still have concerns about the Traffic Committee. And whilst I am prepared to adopt the officer's recommendation, I want to add a number 2 to further demonstrate Council's commitment to open and transparent decision making. The General Manager seek from LG New South Wales its industry policy on the webcasting of open sessions of Traffic Committee meetings. It appeared to me that the Traffic Committee recommendation in relation to the supply of convex safety mirrors is inconsistent with what I see not only in this Shire but other areas. So I'm going to add number 3. Council seek from the Minister for Transport the government's policy on the installation of convex safety mirrors on regional and local roads. A regional road is, and that's not a state road, kind of Mossvale Road, that's a regional road, isn't it?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. But we probably don't have any control on that one, but the local roads. So what would Kengaloon Road be? A local road or a regional road? Who pays for that maintenance?
Through you, Mr. May, I believe that we pay for the maintenance, but I would need to check the classification.
It's just that's where the inconsistencies are, in my view. Someone's asked for it and they've said no, but other people have it. And it's in a section which really is off the road. Anyhow, number 4, in relation to item 6.1, Berrima Marketplace, parking arrangement. This is number 4. In relation to item 6.12, Berrima Marketplace parking arrangements, the meeting on the 29th of June, clarification be sought from the Traffic Committee as to whether there is a statutory requirement for a traffic management plan in relation to the Cars and Coffee monthly events. And I ask that because residents are continually telling me that the council's got it wrong. I personally believe the council's got it right. But let's see what the Traffic Committee says, and because it's not going to go away, the issue. And number 5, the General Manager explore options for meetings of the Traffic Committee to have a more prominent presence on Council's website. And what I'm suggesting there is that residents can find Traffic Committee agendas more easily than having several clicks. And I think even if there was a meetings this week matter, but that's up to the staff. I just would like to see it. So in relation to item 9.21, the Traffic Committee, I would move the officer's recommendation 1 and then 2, 3, 4 and 5 as detailed on the screen and declare that carried. Uh, 10.1, this is a new thing that's appearing on the business paper. I asked a question and it's being formally answered, for which I thank you. My intention in asking that question was to see if having a panel which in my view validates or exposes the competency of the recommendations of the staff. And one way of doing that is how many matters that go through that panel. They're mainly big issues, are ending up in the courts, and you said since the panel's been established, nil. Thank you. In relation to item 10.1, I would move that the council receive and note the report and declare that carried. Having said that, other Land and Environment Court matters are reported. In other words, delegated matters or matters where people have gone to the court, they're reported to the council's internal audit and risk committee, which is very appropriate. And if they see a concern, no doubt they will raise it. And item 10.2, in relation to Station Street, I would move the officer's recommendation that council receive and note this report and declare that carried. That's the end of formal matters on the business paper. General Manager, have you got anything else?
I do, Mr. May. With slight mixed emotions, sadness and happiness. Mr. Park, who has been our Exec Manager, Strategic Outcomes, this will be his last council meeting. He's been appointed to a director's role at another council, so sad for us, very happy for you. So on behalf of the organisation, I just wish to say thank you so much for all of your work. You've been with council for 5 years. Over the last 2 years, you've been in the Executive Manager Strategic Outcomes role, and that was a newly created role as part of the next chapter of Wingecarribee. And in that time, and we've worked very closely together in that 2-year period, I just wish to thank you for your professionalism, your positivity, your drive to get things done, but also the way in which you got things done and the way in which you worked with the community, your communication style, your sense of humour, which at times may be not appropriate, but your sense of humour has been greatly appreciated. The amount of work that you and your team, and there is a team, it's not just all about you, there is a team behind you and with you. What you've actually achieved in the 2 years since the role was created is amazing, and it leaves a really positive legacy for Wingecarribee, so you should be very proud of that. And I don't know what else to say other than I will miss you. I will miss having you in my team. But also I know that Wingecarribee's a better place for you having been here, and I wish you all the best in your next part of your career. So thank you, Michael.
I would echo the words of the General Manager. You've led but one area of the council. There's many other areas of this complex, local government is complex, organisation. And I think the community is indebted for what you and your team have achieved. I think your ability to lead the people in your area is exceptional. Having said that, you never criticise somebody who is going up the ladder. I worry about those who, jump off the ladder or go sideways. So, I think local government will hear a lot more about Michael Park in years to come, and I wish you all the best. I declare the meeting closed.